Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Over this past week, we've taken a closer look at some of the different class changes that have arrived to the War Within beta realms. And with the expansion arriving so soon in just a handful of weeks, I'm pretty sure everybody else is also watching their classes like a hawk, looking for any updates or changes. For the most part, we've been focusing on classes with the most amount of changes, from mages, death knights, warlocks, hunters, you name it. But the class of priest has actually gotten some sizable changes over this past week. And the last few weeks before that, the class has been flying mostly under the radar, and it hasn't necessarily gotten the changes that the priest community really wanted to see. Some of them wish for bigger revamps and some of the core issues and adjustments, but the class has seen its hero specs totally updated, with the Void Weaver previously being like the only really good option, but now Archon and Oracle both show potential. So for today's video, I want to do a bit of a deeper dive for the class of priest specifically and go over all of the different changes that the class has seen over the last few weeks. As always though, if you guys want to see more regular updates for War Within for any of our classes, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So when it comes to the class of priest, we actually haven't seen a lot of changes for the development of this expansion so far, which has been one of the more common criticisms from the priest community. And essentially, I wanted to compile all the different changes we've seen for the class of priest over the last few weeks, where we have seen quite a bit of improvements, which is good to see. Though in terms of like actual changes, a lot of people wanted class revamps, let's be honest, like the class talent tree, the spec talent trees, all of those things to be adjusted even a little bit. That would have been really nice to see. So some of the basic priest things such as flash heals, 20% improvement there. The amount of absorption that absorbed shield power word shield can gain is also increased by 20%, and power word life healing has been increased by 20%. I think it's pretty cool because there are also some other benefits, such as from darkness comes light talent, which also been further improved. Your flash heal is now increased by 3% per stack instead of 1, and the stacks mount up to 20 stacks instead of 50. So you actually get more value a little bit out of this ability, and you get to max out those stacks a little quicker. And that is something that's actually really cool to see with priest being a class, you know, like old priest, you are still have a natural healing capability. So being able to top yourself off or an ally in a quick heal, even as a shadow priest, it is actually kind of nice as a defensive option. On the bottom right hand side, we've seen a few talents replacing mind games, which is, I guess it's been a while since I really took a look at priest, but I think last time I looked at it, mind games was not a PvP talent. So this is now a PvP talent, and that whole talent tree has been adjusted to be a little more generic. We have things such as cauterizing shadows, where your shadow word pain expires or is refreshed with less than 5 seconds, and your nearby ally is healed for 18,000 health, and I guess it scales maybe your primary stats or versatility even. So that heal has actually been increased by 60%. So this, I believe, is the amped up version, or either the tooltip has not been adjusted yet, but it is supposed to be increased by 60%. Further down below that is manipulation, where you actually take less damage from enemies afflicted by shadow word pain. And further below that is Phantom Reach, which extends the range of most abilities by 15%, which is okay. I mean, it goes basically from 40 yards to 46 yards, which is nice, having a little bit extra range to it. You essentially have the range of that of a balanced druid, which I think could be useful in things such as PvP. In particular, it also helps out with priest when it comes to positioning, since this is not the most mobile class in the game. It's gotten a lot more mobility since the last few expansions, but it's still one of the less mobile casters of all the other caster options, or even ranged options to that matter. So having a little bit of range, I think, is kind of nice. Plus, apparently they updated the visual for Void Shift, which I was not aware of, but this was somewhat of a recent change, to say, if anything. Oh, it does kind of send you your health bar to them in a way. I do like that with Void Shift, and I assume that it's also going to go backwards if they have a health bar of their own that you get to send. But that's kind of neat. Has more of this shadowy effect to it. A big fan of all the shadowy elements they've added for this expansion so far, though. But from there on, we can move on into some of the hero talent options, such as the Void Weaver, probably a fan favorite out of most hero specs available in the game. The ability of Entropic Rift and the void animations that it has, how it explodes, how it builds up in value, the Void Blast, but also the ability for Shadow Priest to move while channeling abilities such as Void Torrent. That is massive. It's a lot of fun to play with, and you just gotta love all these like blue void animations. Normally most of these things are purple, but this like mix of blue and purple hue into this void orb. Ah, it's so good looking. I'm a big Big fan of what they've been able to do with it so far. But Void Weaver being the most popular choice, it is being played by both Disc Priest as well as Shadow Priest, and the only thing that this one has seen so far is the image tuning, where they're nerfing it, but it's still getting quite a bit of play either way. However, since then, we have seen adjustments to plenty of other hero talents since, such as the Archon, which is available for both Disc as well as Holy Priest, and Archon has gone through, or rather Oracle, has gone through quite a few changes here. The Oracle gameplay used to be about this buff type of mechanic for like a different type of PI. They completely reworked to instead provide the healing specs of Priest, either Disc or Holy, a little bit more of that healing value and utilitarian benefits in general. To give you a quick rundown, it is a meta charge with 2 charges available, and it allows you to benefit from buffs going in a very specific order, starting with Insight into them Piety or Solace. This buff of Premonition, or rather the ability, can either have a 45-second cooldown or a minute cooldown, but the effects are 40% stronger. Starting up with Insight, it just grants a cooldown reduction for the next 3 abilities, which you'll primarily use for rotational skills. So for a spec like Disc Priest, that's a bunch of penances that you can cast back to back to back, 3 or 4 penances in a row, which has some gameplay uses, but also for, let's say, like Holy Priest, that's an opportunity for them to spread prayer of mendings all over the place. Essentially, the way we'll be using this ability will be on basic rotational skills, not big cooldowns, but it can still really speed up rotation quite a bit, and I like the way that it works, especially when you think of like Disc Priest, Mindbender, Inescapable Torment, and spamming a bunch of penances back to back to back, which allows you to create some combos and synergies, which is surprisingly kind of fun. Premonition of Piety increases your overall healing and allows overhealing to also be spread to nearby allies to make sure that you don't lose out on any raw healing on anybody in your party or raid. This is just a raw healing buff. Premonition of Solace is essentially another external. After using it, your next single target healing spell will grant an ally an absorb shield and will reduce their damage taken by 15% or 21% if you choose the empowered Premonition version. This is just essentially a PI, a damage reduction. For Holy Priest, that's a nice bit of DR. For Disc Priest, that's another layer of DRs that you can add to your abilities. And the effect itself is actually pretty strong from a single target perspective. In fact, I actually found Premonition and Oracle playstyle kind of fun in 5-man content, but I do wonder how it's going to translate into raiding content, where Void Weaver enhances Disc Priest's Atonement Healing, which can literally heal your entire raid or party. The same thing can be said about Archon for Holy, with the Halo ability healing literally everybody in your raid. But with Premonition and Oracle, I do wonder how that will translate specifically into raid healing. But in 5-man content, I feel like that cooldown reduction and Fade Bender and how you can amplify that healing or go for the cooldown reduction, there's a bit of playability to it because of your capstone, which essentially allows you to benefit from all these effects all in one go, which can help you be more of a setup healer than anything. And surprisingly, I found it to be quite effective, especially with some of the different buffs that we've seen for both Holy and Disc added as part of the Oracle playstyle, such as the talent of Preventive Measures, which increases the absorb shield of your Power Word shield by 25%, used to be 15%. And it also increases the damage of Penance, Smite, and Holy Nova by 40%. These used to be 15%, and that one isn't particularly notable. So all of your Holy abilities could actually gain quite a bit of additional value. Preemptive Care is another one that's also get buffed up, where Preemptive Care will increase the duration of atonements by 3 seconds instead of 1. And Assured Safety allows Power Word Shield to apply 4 stacks of Prayer of Mending to an ally. Used to be 2. So Prayer of Mending actually ends up being a decent portion of your overall healing. For Holy Priest, these talents are adjusted a little bit differently, with Preventive Measures increasing the healing of your Prayer of Mending by 25%, while increasing the damage of Smite, Holy Fire, and Holy Nova by 25%, up from 15%. With Assured Safety, Prayer of Mending casts apply Power Word Shield to an ally at 100% effectiveness, used to be only 25% effectiveness. And Preemptive Care increasing the duration of renew by 6 seconds instead of 3 seconds. And the effect of Preemptive Care actually extends to other talents, such as Revitalizing Prayers, as well as abilities such as Lightwell. Plus, when you play Archon, you have a character with eyes glowing with a little thing above your head, kind of predicting your future with premonition. It is so cool. It has a bit more flavor than some of the other options of hero specs available. And when I say this, the gameplay genuinely surprised me. Oracle is a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be, but I do wonder how that will translate. Void Weaver has had a dominance throughout the entire beta cycle, and hell, even Archon has been getting a bit of play recently. The Oracle is the one that I don't think I see nearly as often when it comes to just pugging, when it comes to doing dungeons on any other DPS, let alone, I don't really see that many priest healers to begin with, but Oracle in particular, I actually was very surprised by just how interesting it can play into either the disc or the holy toolkits. Besides this, Archon is another hero spec that's actually grown a bit more competitive for the spec of Shadow. Normally you'll play Void Weaver, but now there may be an opportunity for players to play Archon, and there's a lot more players this week in particular been picking up Archon Shadow Priest over Void Weaver when it comes to Mythic Plus testing at the bare minimum. This is because Archon finally has a bit of a solid gameplay loop behind it. Normally, Archon plays around the ability of Halo, which just does AoE damage to everything around you, which is fine on its own, but it's not as exciting. What is exciting is Empowered Surge's ability, which has been buffed up this week to increase the damage on Mindspec Insanity or Mindflay Insanity by 60%, up from like 25, and Halo guarantees that it will grant you surges in order to get those Insanity version of abilities. So it's a guaranteed burst method every minute, plus Halo also puts a debuff on the target, making them take more damage from you. It's a lot more of a burstier, total focus type of a build that gives you this burst window every minute, and the damage is actually exciting and very comparable to some of your other stronger abilities. Where Void Torrent is a massive beam of void energy slowly channeling to target, the Insanity Flame, for example, is a much faster beam that deals comparably similar-ish damage. And these Mind Flays can be further amplified with various talents such as Mastermind, which increases the crit chance of basic abilities, but also critical strike damage by up to 40%. To further amplify this burst and setup nature of Archon, Perfected Form also gains additional buffs, increasing the damage benefits of Dark Ascension by 12% instead of 10%, and the additional active bonus of Void Form by 10% instead of 15%, further amplifying the overall burst window that either of the two abilities can offer, with Archon becoming a more minute and 2 minute kind of a setup combo or setup class playstyle, while Void Weaver being more of a combo class playstyle. And hopefully the two will be fairly comparable to one another after all of the tuning and changes, because we're definitely not done with tuning. Speaking of tuning, this is where a majority of priest changes have happened, where a lot of players in the community would like to see some substantial adjustments when it comes to their talents. For the most part, the class of priest is going to be releasing as it was in Dragonflight into the War Within, but with hero specs included. That being said, for Disc Priest in particular, we're seeing a healing increase of 3% with a damage increase of 5%. With the Atonement healing, it kind of does end up at least dipping into the damage component to amplify its healing. Abilities such as Powered Radiance saw about a 10% healing increase, and the cooldown reduction of the ability itself, the cooldown of Powered Radiance starts out at 18 seconds instead of 20. They did see a reduction to the cooldown reduction of Bright Pupil, but it essentially allows you to not pick up Bright Pupil or not feel like you have to, and then you can pick up Enduring Luminescence instead for a bit more effectiveness of atonements, while still getting a slightly shorter cooldown of Powered Radiance when you're trying to play around your setups. The ability of Penance has had its healing increased by 20%, and Rapture, the ability itself, starts its cooldown immediately as soon as you press it. Rapture in particular also, it's now going to last for 30 seconds, so if you do need to delay the power word shields until later, like in situations like Mythic Plus or PvP where you really need to wait for those specific moments when you need to shield somebody, you can now delay by a bit and then use it when you need it, which I think is a nice convenience change at the very least. For Disc Priest, Holy Nova healing has been increased by 23%, which should hopefully make it a little bit better with this whole Archon type of holy damage playstyle. Power Word Shield by itself has had its absorbed for Disc Priest in particular further increased by 30%, which is quite noticeable. So together with something like Rapture, which increases it further by 80%, you really do get some beefy shields on a 5-man content. They did see a slight reduction with Abyssal Reverie, where the atonement healing from your shadow spells is reduced from a 20% maximum down to a 10%. The talents such as Contrition as well as Heaven's Wrath did see their cost of talent points reduced from 2 points to 1 max. For the spec of Holy, we're seeing adjustments to the ability of Heal increased by 20%. Holy Word Serenity has also been increased by 20% as well. Divine Images Healing Light Healing has also been increased by 20%, and the damage of the spec has also been increased by 10% on top of it, with AoE abilities such as Prayer of Healing as well as Circle of Healing having their heals increased by 30%. Although Healing Chorus is not going to be as effective, only increasing the healing of your Circle of Healing by 3% instead of 5% per stack, but the raw boost to Circle of Healing baseline healing should make it a little bit better. The talent of Lightweaver has also seen an improvement, increase in healing by 25% instead of 15%, which is a significant gain. As for the spec of Shadow, we are not seeing nearly as many changes in tuning. We are seeing an overall 3% damage reduction, which is, as big as that can really be. A majority of the talent changes are going to come from some of the abilities that have happened or some of the adjustments that have happened with the hero spec of Archon. That said, though, Dark Ascension did actually see a bit of a reduction, going from a 25% damage increase to a 20% for non-periodic damage and abilities, which I guess makes Void Eruption just a little bit better of an option that's competing with one another. But I think this reduction also makes Archon and this talent together a bit more of a must-have if you're going to be putting the two and two together. The ability of Mind Flay has also had its overall shadow time has been reduced by quite a bit, becoming a much faster of an ability, while Shadow Spike or Mind Spike Insanity does gain a little bit more insanity for every spike that you get to send out. The talent of Mind Melt has been made a little bit easier to play into. You can only now stack up Mind Melt 3 times, but every single stack increases the crit chance of your Mind Blast by 30%, up to a 90%, which is essentially a guaranteed crit. And finally, Idle Cthulhu, which has been reported to be broken and not functional at all of a talent, has had its tentacle damage increased by 50%, and the tentacles apparently deal damage 10 times over their duration instead of 15 times over the channel duration, which is, I guess, an increase in terms of single target or AoE. But like I said, there's not a lot of priests that are running Idle Cthulhu, and based on the most recent updates, it apparently just doesn't work, or rather priests you going through their basic rotation break Idle Cthulhu. So your basic priest abilities actually break this ability, which is unfortunate, but the damage increases should be decent and should be noticeable once the talent finally works. That being said, though, on Shadow Priest in particular, I actually like the dichotomy between Archon and Void Weaver. I feel like Void Weaver ends up being a very aggressive playstyle, one that actually ends up utilizing Dark Ascension quite a bit. And after playing with it, I feel like if you like playing or having a burst window every 30 seconds or every minute, and you want to play your Shadow Priest more aggressively with a bit more mobility, I feel like Void Weaver is the perfect playstyle. With the ability of your Entropic Rift, you generate yourself a really small burst window where you want to sync as many abilities as possible, and then it's all about setting up for that next burst window with the next Void Torrent whenever that becomes available. At the beginning of the release of Void Weaver, it felt like every Shadow Priest was playing it, and it felt like the most overpowering option compared to Archon. But after all of these changes, I feel like Archon now actually can stand on its own 2 feet with its Empowered Surges ability. The extra damage that it provides is actually kind of nice. The Halo ability does quite a bit of damage all on its own, generating a little bit extra cleave or even mass AoE in bigger group situations. And the single target burst damage that you can do with the fast channeled Mind Flays and Sanities are actually kind of fun to play into. It has a bit of a different type of burst window, where Archon is a strict 1 minute burst window, where Void Weaver is more of a 30-second burst window. One that's a little bit more planning oriented, which is Archon, and the other which is a little bit more setup heavy, which is Void Weaver. And I kind of like the dichotomy between the two, but it was so weird because I didn't expect for priests to feel this fast paced with Void Weaver compared to some of the other classes that really are active. And that's actually kind of a cool thing to see. Even though this class of priests didn't really see as many changes, I feel like Void Weaver at least adds that extra bit of burst to it, which is fun, and I actually really enjoyed it. But Archon, I feel like, can stand on its own 2 feet now to a degree, at least in terms of the playstyle being wildly different from Void Weaver with a slightly different focus, but having quite a bit of extra punch with those massive flay insanities. But that's going to be literally everything that we've seen when it comes to Praise over the last few weeks. I am glad to see that their hero specs are getting a bit more nuance and a little bit more talents with a gameplay hook to it. I think something like Oracle is definitely a very ambitious option, though I am worried where Priest will end up in terms of the overall popularity. Priest as a class has always had a unique aspect with how Shadow is able to weave in dots, but also instantaneous damage, and how it kind of all coalesces together with a very fun, cleave-focused playstyle that's essentially Outlaw Rogue Blade Flurry, but as a caster, which I've always enjoyed. Disc, outright one of my favorite DPS healers in the game, or rather the heal through DPS, which is my favorite mechanic, and Holy is a very solid option for so many newer players coming into the expansion, though I am wondering how this class is going to perform once all the tuning is over, because it's not necessarily getting a lot of new things to bring into the expansion, and I feel like a lot of its balance will hang on the tuning. And I kind of from there on want to pass it off to you guys in the comments down below. What do you think of the class upgrade so far? Are you happy with it or not? And if you're not quite happy, what changes would you want to see in the future? They're most likely not going to be able to implement anything right now, but what would you want to see out of the class upgrades if they were to revamp it or change anything from it completely? Maybe either in a patch 11.0.5 or in the next season of 11.1. What would you specifically want to see for the class upgrades? Let me know that in the comments down below. But with that being said, I do want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and hopefully you enjoyed. And if you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community. Link to that is in the description of every single one of these videos. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.